Good evening, everyone. We are happy to have everyone join us for our second session in the Building Cultural Knowledge Learning Series. If you are tuning in for the first time, the Building Cultural Knowledge Series is a mean to honor the experiences and learn about the beautiful communities that make up our Canadian society. It is also an opportunity to build our cultural knowledge of one another so that we can develop meaningful relationships, interact without bias and judgment, stand in solidarity with one another, and embrace our cultural authenticity in our words and actions. My name is Cole Reed of Welland Centennial Secondary School, and I am a DSBN student. I would like to begin by centering our location by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations Métis and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Tonight is about reimagining the narrative by bringing with joy in celebrating Black excellence and Black futures. To kick off this celebration, we are honored to have Dr. Jean Augustine with us this evening. Jean Augustine has made history as the first Black woman elected to Canada's Parliament and served from 1993 to 2006. Her tenure included distinguished service as Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Minister of State for Multiculturalism and the Status of Women, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Deputy Speaker of Parliament. Her legislative success include the historic Black History Month motion and the groundbreaking Famous Five motion, which authorized the first and still only statues on Parliament Hill depicting women other than Queen Elizabeth. From 2007 to 2015, she served as Ontario's first ever Fairness Commissioner. Welcome, Dr. Jean Augustine.
I am glad to be a part of the District School Board of Niagara's Celebrating Black Joy and Excellent event happening in Black History Month 2022. Niagara is one of the places that everyone dreams of going, and everyone who visits has that joy and that celebration and the importance of that place in our geography as Canadians, but also Niagara has a unique history that intersects with the Underground Railroad and figures in Black history, including Harriet Tubman, Anthony Burns, and so many, Chloe Cooley, so many others. And so it is important that we know that history. And it is important that you in Niagara share that history as you share that place with us. Black History 2022 has a special theme, and that theme is celebrating today and celebrating into the future. When I put the motion simply said that Black Canadians have been here, they have been part of the growth, they've been part of the development, they've been part of the building of Canada. And I asked my colleagues in the House of Commons to designate February as Black History Month in Canada. You know the vast history of the African Americans and Black History Month, which started in 1926 in the United States. Black History Month in Canada officially designated in 1995. Black History Month is about honoring the enormous contributions that Black people have made and continue to make in all sections and sectors of society. It is about celebrating joy and excellence, resilience, innovation, determination, and hard work towards a more inclusive and diverse Canada, a Canada in which everyone has the opportunity to flourish. Black History Month helps fill gaps of knowledge and strengthens the knowledge of all of our young people. And again, the school board, the educators, the leadership must ensure that young people are aware of their history. Because you see, Black history is not just for Black people. Black history is Canadian history. And to the young people and to those that we pass the baton, we say, know your past and be proud of it. Recognize where we are in the present and embrace it. And educators help us to embrace the present with the knowledge of the past. And let's go forward into the future with joy and see excellence as the way forward. Have a great, great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jean Augustine, for joining us this evening and for leading the path of excellence and showing Black youth that representation matters and that Black leaders are necessary in every place in society. Our next two speakers will be speaking from their lived experiences in Niagara and sharing their insights on reimagining Black joy and Black futures. Katawe is a Brock alumnus with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Masters of Arts in Gender Studies and Feminist Research from McMaster University. Katawe brings a background enriched with experiences and understandings on the difficult conversations that are essential to developing lasting and effective change. Lydia is an author, educator, and creator with over 5 years of experience working in HIV prevention and consent education specifically for African, Caribbean, and Black communities in Canada. She has published 3 chapbooks of poetry between 2019 and 2021 and produced a collaborative video project by the name of Joy is Our Birthright. Welcome, Katawe and Lydia.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Katawe Henry. My current role is the anti-racism lead at the Deputy of the Attorney General for the Ministry of the Attorney General for the Government of Ontario. I am not representing my employer, however, in any manner. I'm acting and representing myself as an anti-racist and anti-oppressive educator based in Niagara and an independent lecturer. I'm serving in my personal capacity, and any opinions, analysis, or views expressed are personal and do not represent the views of the Ministry of the Attorney General or the Government of Ontario. And I have utilized my own resources and personal time to develop this presentation today with you.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lydia Collins, and I'm the Learning and Development Specialist at the African and Caribbean Council of HIV and AIDS in Ontario, and I'm also representing myself in a personal capacity today, utilizing my own resources and representing myself as an independent workshop facilitator.
Great. I'm so looking forward to chatting tonight. And I know that Lydia, you and I have had the pleasure of working together before, both as, Black folks based in Niagara, born and raised here in St. Catharines. For me, in terms of the type of work that I've done and how I kind of position myself, I'm born and raised here in the Niagara region. I've been living and working on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Neutral peoples my entire life. I've had the pleasure of going all the way from K through 12 through the DSBN specifically, and my experiences and the way that my understanding of race and racism and oppression have been shaped here and have really driven me to pursue education and professional development that speaks specifically to anti-racism work. In terms of some of the notes of what we're hoping to cover, I definitely want to ground our experiences in that perspective of have coming from Niagara, as well as highlighting the ways that my experiences have literally created the roles that I'm in today, and how that's worked for me to kind of look at how our work can go forward, but also what some of my experiences looked like in the past.
Right. Definitely. And I think that's one thing that I'm looking forward to, and something that we've talked about before as well, is kind of looking at how both of our roles have been, and our career paths have been shaped definitely heavily by our experiences growing up in Niagara, both through the DSBN, and looking at how we've kind of taken our experiences and what we felt was not present or not adequate in regards to education around anti-Blackness or race theory. And for me, as well as a sexual health educator, a big part of that work in regards to consent education and sexual health education was also the lack of race represented in sexual health education, and how anti-Blackness impacts Black folks' sexual and romantic lives, right? And so that really stemmed my very specific career path of not only doing sexual health work, but doing it specifically in the capacity of working with African, Caribbean, and Black folks in Ontario. And so really looking at our experiences and what we might have needed growing up in Niagara at that time, and being able to reimagine what it could have been like if we had people like us, right, to kind of bring some of the resources and have conversations like this at that time. So I think it's a really exciting conversation, and I'm excited to be having it with you.
On that note, I know that you've connected poetry through a lot of the work that you do. And as someone who has been quite fortunate enough to purchase some of your poetry, I was wondering if we wanted to start with one of your poems. I know that was something that we discussed, and I'd love to hear it again, of course.
Of course. Thank you so much. So yeah, I think, with it being Black History Month, one thing I know we both have been talking a lot about is how we can kind of shift away from Black History Month only being a time to represent Black pain, but instead also looking at how can we celebrate Black futures, Black people who are here currently, and also just really prioritizing joy, which I know is a big, the focus of our conversation right now as well. And so this poem is called Joy is Our Birthright, and it's from my recent chapbook, which is called To Everyone Who's Ever Been. You told me my career is what would get me out of bed each morning. And every day I'm telling you that it's my family. Long baths and meaningful conversations. It is my first tea of the day, the next chapter of that book, the way my friends' mouths curve when they feel overwhelmed with love. It is loud night drives without interruption and still quiet moments that don't require an explanation. It is homegrown food, hand-pulled from its root, that resurrects each night around the dinner table. It is soft sun and cold water, ensuring my body is always warm and replenished. It is seeds to plant trees and knowledge so we can dream in green and brown and Black. It is not revenge. It is not about you. My joy is found in the unexpected couch cushion dollars and the smiles from nappy heads passing on the sidewalk. It is ours. It belongs to us. You cannot have this. Not now, not ever. My joy is freedom. My joy is freedom. Our joy is freedom. And freedom is this. So that is Joy is Our Birthright. This was also turned into a collaborative video project with a Black production company in Ottawa called UniLearnal. And we turned into a video project kind of focused on Black, queer, and trans joy. And so you could find that on YouTube as well. Yeah.
I love it. I think it's so great. And, thinking about that and like ideas of, joy being our birthright and something that's inherent. One of the first things that comes to my mind is, what does reclaiming joy look like for you? And that poem definitely inspires me to think about a whole bunch of answers. But I don't know if you wanted to start in terms of answering that question.
Yeah, I love that question. I think when it comes to what reclaiming joy looks like for me, I feel like I really encompassed my my feelings of that in that poem. When I wrote that poem, I was just thinking of a lot of the back to basics, right? I talk about homegrown food. I talk about being with community. I talk about the first tea of the day, spending time with friends, those really small joys that I think are often overlooked when we think about when we think about Black joy. I think sometimes when we think about Black joy, there's this, because it's considered like a radical thing and a political thing, we sometimes don't realize that it's not necessarily these really exceptional moments that are, classify as Black joy. It's not necessarily something that has to do with race at all sometimes, right? It's not necessarily things that are directly linked to our wins politically in regards to advancing in regards to dismantling anti-Blackness. It can be those really simple things of the fact that, and something I really reiterate, especially at a time like Black History Month, is that Black people don't need to be exceptional to be celebrated, right? We don't have to, it doesn't need to be, you can just be, you could just be existing. And so just that poem really was just my way of saying, when I'm just existing as is, that is joy for me. When I am doing these small things that bring me joy, those are the things that I enjoy doing. And so, yeah, when I think of reclaiming joy, I think of reclaiming the small things, which in my first poetry chapbook, Angry Black Women, I talked about that a little bit in a poem where I said, white privilege is being able to write a love poem, right? And so as a Black author as well, one thing I notice a lot is when it comes to receiving grants or receiving praise around some of my essays or some of my work, a lot of times it's during times where people want to hear stories about Black struggle and Black pain. But when I write like a love poem, sometimes those are the pieces that don't get as engaged with. When a lot of Black authors just want to write sci-fi, right? They don't want to write political, radical things about Black history and about enslavement or about, really huge moments in Black history throughout the world. Sometimes it's simply just wanting to write a love story or wanting to write something really cool. So like, I don't know, Black Panther, which of course has like context of Blackness in there in a political way as well. But just sometimes it doesn't always, me reclaiming my joy is by doing the small things that don't have to do with my proximity to whiteness, right? They don't have to do with how am I able to talk about my life and my joys outside of just in relation to, being Black, which is inherently in the context of the world that we're living in, something that's considered a threat when put beside whiteness. Like, how can I just, enjoy my life and do my thing and reclaim my little joys, even in the small, small ways.
Absolutely. I love that. And, thinking about the fact that you need to reimagine what ideas of Blackness look like, and, get away from some of the words in your thesaurus that when you look up the word Black, say negative things, and think about Blackness through a more positive perspective, as well as, how you were saying, it doesn't have to be a space where everything that Black people write has to be from this place of pain. Why can't it be in, a place of joy or a place of writing about just sci-fi and like wizards or like whatever, right? Like allowing Black people to be full people.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing that's still missing in our conversations, is to still look at Black folks as just these sites of learning, through sites of learning about pain and struggle, and rather than seeing Black people as people, full people with range of emotions and folks that disagree and agree and look different and look the same and, exist in ways that thesaurus will say does not exist for Blackness. So I love that. And it makes me think about reimagining where we can go in the future and what Black futures look like, but also reimagining Black pasts. And thinking about the fact that there has been joy, even in some of these horrible things that we've talked about. laughter has been something that has been written about for Black folks for centuries. And the fact that even, in horrible times of struggle, coming up with all of the most popular genres of music and determining what is cool and not cool in terms of pop culture, just reimagining the fact that Black joy has always been here. It's something that's been kind of laid down before us. So I love that idea and thinking about those kind of things and how your poem kind of invokes emotion behind some of those words.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and like thinking about that, as two folks that have grown up in Niagara, thinking about some of our experiences and what that looked like, what would have been helpful for us, and how these roles that we're doing now are kind of born from those experiences. I'm wondering if you've, like, not to make this sound like all interviewee, but I now know, what those connections were. And I know that for myself, that's something that I think a lot about, quite literally creating my own jobs in some weird way of just being that kid that wouldn't sit down and, go with the flow and had to ask a million and one different questions about, well, why aren't we doing this? Why do we celebrate this and not this? Thinking about the fact that when I was in high school, I asked the principal, what are we doing for Black History Month? And they laughed at me. They're like, well, what are we going to do for Black History Month? I'm like, if you don't know, I can't help anybody. You know what I mean? So
I'm just a kid.
Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just a kid. The fact that that wasn't too long ago. I mean,
yeah.
I had my BlackBerry and my Motorola Razr during high school. Like, it wasn't too far along. And, I couldn't afford an iPhone, but like, living in that era and that time, and social media was very much a thing. It's not like, I was going to school 300 years ago. I was going to school not too long ago. Like, I'm still young,
Right.
So I don't know if you have like specific points that you think about with that, but that's definitely something that's on my mind a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, for me, especially when I think in the context of my role as a sexual health educator, and the work that I've gone on to do, it's interesting when I reflect on the career path that I went into and look at how so much of my work now is really just me as an adult answering my childhood questions.
Yes, I love that.
It's just me
Absolutely.
being like, I didn't have access to this, this, and this, and nobody could answer this and this question, and I didn't know how to access it, and so I'm going to be that person, the next little Black girl growing up in a predominantly white city. And so, especially in regards to sexual health, that's something that I've been so passionate about for a really long time, because as a Black girl in a predominantly white city growing up, there were so many different instances of microaggressions and of racism that I faced in my community, often from peers, not necessarily the really overt kind of aggressive ways that we think of racism, but of course in the microaggressive kind of subtle ways where you're the only one who looks like you, so people always have something to say about it, right? And sometimes kids just say whatever they think. And of course, as I got older in high school, some of those things I noticed a lot how they related to my my dating life, right, or my romantic interests, or my sexual health or interests. And so, as you know, as I noticed the kind of ways in which I was being viewed as I gotten older, and we talk a lot about, I know both of us in our work have talked a lot about adultification of Black kids, right? And how Black kids are often seen as much older than they are, especially Black girls. And so for me, a big thing that I've spent a lot of time healing and reflecting on over the years, and then putting into my work, is looking at how my Black girlhood was interrupted, which is something that Tressie McMillan Cottom talks about, is like that idea of Black girlhood being interrupted when older men decided it's interrupted, right? And so it's not like you get to be young and playful and naive for a really long time, like sometimes our peers. And so that's one of the things that I really try to prioritize in my work now, is just trying to answer questions again that I had as a kid around, looking at the links between racism and sexual health. And of course, sexual health is so broad, right? I know the word, it comes up and people get scared because they hear the word sex. But when I say sexual health, I'm talking about also, you know, really young folks who need to learn about consent, right? Even in the most basic sense, not in a sexual way, but just in the most basic way. So I think about consent, I think about confidence, body autonomy, being able to, you know, tell people yes or no, or tell them how you feel, and just really feel like your body is your own, and feel confident in that. And so just, yeah, I feel like there was some of that advocacy that I needed more, that I wish that I had. And so I try to reflect that in my work of looking at those links between, you know, fetishization and hypersexualization of Black girls, right? Like, these things are very much things that impacted me. And I'm at a point in my life now where I can articulate that and put it into words. Whereas as a kid, I didn't necessarily understand why there were certain nicknames that people called me, or people had comments about the way my body developed faster than some of my peers, and those kinds of things, right? And so being able to put words to those things has been really useful for me in my own healing as an adult, but also is really beautiful to see when I'm able to go to high schools now and talk to Black girls who are, you know, the same age that I was when I had some of these questions, and they have me there answering these questions. And I'm like, this would have made the world of a difference and saved so much time on therapy and different things if I could have just had this conversation 15 years ago. So yeah, I would say that's some of the biggest connections is that led me into this work, was based on just some of the smaller interactions of the everydayness of being the only one in the classroom, right? Being the only one there. Yeah. Like, and I think that's something I really want people to understand, is that racism doesn't have to be overt, you know. When somebody is the only one there, they notice, they feel it. When you're the only one of something in a room, you see it. And then when the people above you, like your principal, are laughing when you ask about what you're doing for Black History Month, and you feel like you don't have an advocate there to say, hey, yes, this might be a predominantly white school, but Black history is everyone's history, and we all need to learn it. Like, we shouldn't have to come to you and say that. And so it's really awesome to see, you know, Black kids growing up in the DSBN now who are getting programs like this, right? And we're seeing how amazing, you know, some of these opportunities and initiatives are. I think is just like a full circle moment for us as two kids who grew up in this system, and, you know, have been led into our careers based off a lot of our experiences in Niagara and in the DSBN, and now getting to contribute back to those same students that we once were.
And like, on that note, you know, it makes me think a lot about the fact that these conversations, these sites of seeing other folks, and, you know, having books in your classrooms, or conversations in the workroom, in the you know, lunchroom for staff, or for folks that work in community-based spaces, to see, you know, that representation. Obviously, the conversation should never live and die at representation, but that in and of itself is a site of Black joy, right? Like, to see and feel represented, to feel seen, to feel known, to feel like your experiences aren't just you. And sometimes the way that racial gaslighting will make you feel like you're the only soul in the world, and it's all in your head, and it's nothing to do with any of the systems that we live in. To see somebody else who's like, yeah, same. And this is, you know, some examples of ways that you can go about, you know, feeling about that. Like, for example, with your poetry, like finding something that speaks to you, that you can turn around and speak to and have your voice. And so I think, you know, I could talk about this point all night. But one of the things that, you know, comes out of that, for me, is how that directly impacted my decision to kind of work in community-based spaces, and have things that directly put resources in folks' hands, or education directly to folks in an accessible way that meets them where they're at. And I think about the fact that that lack of education is incredibly harmful, not only for Black folks, as you said, but for everybody, right? I remember reading about the reasons why non-Black parents should buy Black dolls for their kids, or let their kids watch shows with Black doctors and Black teachers and Black lawyers, as well as just Black next door neighbors, is not just because of representation, but so that they can also reimagine the narrative of the relationship they have between who belongs in certain spaces and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And, I think that it's not just, Black kids that are going to benefit, for example, from a session like this, or future sessions, but also all the other people in the space.
Yeah.
And I think that those are some of the folks, because sometimes those are the folks that are the sites of gatekeeping, for example, denying resources, denying experiences, shaping those experiences and in a bad way, and not speaking up for folks. And I think about some of the examples of just being young and in Niagara and trying to get something going off the ground, and talking with folks about the fact that there's so much Black history here. Harriet Tubman used to live in St. Catharines for 10 years, thinking about the fact that I didn't learn that in school. The fact that we could have done some amazing tours just even in the Niagara region. I know that, for organizers of trips, not just in schools, but in workplaces, it's so hard to find somewhere cool to send people that people are going to actually want to spend their money and time on. But you don't even have to leave Niagara for that. So that's something that, again, that I could also talk about all day. But about, the work that we do and how it was quite literally born out of our experiences out of Niagara, and our experiences of having joy taken from us, or joy, repackaged in a way that we didn't necessarily want. I think, this is a really wonderful opportunity to get to talk about that and think through that. And I'm even coming up with new thoughts that I didn't have like an hour ago about the topic. An hour will change, but it's been really beneficial for me to get to chat with you about it. I don't know if you have any other points on that note that you want to add.
No, I agree. I think all of that is resonating, and is one of those things where, like you said, you're constantly kind of, and I find even throughout, as I continue to do the work that I do more, if I do a new project, or if I think of something new, I always kind of link it back to, oh wow, again, this is me, reclaiming that joy from my childhood, and reclaiming the what I needed for myself as a young person in Niagara. And so again, and I think we even talked about this just personally before. For me, when I look back, like the most important piece wasn't just representation, like you said, like needing to get fuller than just representation. Because when I was at home, it was Black people everywhere, right? Like it wasn't so much representation in the sense of, like, I think people get it confused when we say representation. It's not like, oh, this Black person has never seen another Black person before. Like I went home to my Black family and my Black parents and my Black siblings, and very much was aware of who I was and how I looked. So what I needed more was the tools to be able to advocate for myself as a Black person in a predominantly white space, where I was inevitably dealing with microaggressions and questions that my white counterparts didn't have to deal with. And also, I needed for there to be more opportunities for learning and capacity building for the adults in my life, the staff, the teachers, the community organizers, the people who are in charge of extracurriculars, the coaches, to be able to have things like this where, in 2022, for pretty much any role that you're in, there is some level of anti-Black education or equity and diversity training that is required, no matter how small or big up your position is, where you have to know how to support people. Because when I think about what I needed most as a young person, again, it wasn't like I needed more pictures of Black representation. I had plenty of that in my home and in the media that I was consuming. Wasn't always necessarily well-rounded representation, but it was, it was there, at least in a lot of the media I was consuming. What I really, really, really needed was to have the adults in my life who weren't Black, who were to be able to advocate for me. Because of course it's one thing to advocate for myself as a kid in school,
Mm-hmm.
but it's another thing to be able to tell a teacher, tell someone, this is what happened to me, and I need you to be able to call it out and identify to the other students that this is what it is, right? And this is what we need to talk about. So
yeah. That accompliceship piece, like
yeah,
calling for more accomplices in this work, folks to quite literally recognize privilege and kind of say, I'm not allowing this to continue, to directly get in between you and those experiences. You talking about what you heard about dealing with your childhood. I've similarly heard that all adulthood is becoming the type of adult that would have saved your child. And
right.
so very similarly, I think, becoming the type of person that would have fixed a lot of things for you when you were a kid. I think about, what you were saying around really needing folks to open themselves up to these conversations in a meaningful way by actually actualizing and actioning some of these things, because I do think that folks were aware that some of the things were problematic but didn't feel comfortable to say anything, and that as a result you suffered. And so similarly I think about how growing up in Niagara definitely gave me a different type of skin, like in the metaphor sense for some of this work, and really be okay with sometimes being the only one that was saying or doing something in a way that some of my friends who grew up in different education boards, for example, don't necessarily have, because they've always had those supports or more representation, for example, in terms of their teachers and in their classrooms, than I did.
And especially in education, like this is such an important place for us to be having this conversation, because I think it's important for folks, from two people who have gone through the education system, like you said, not too long ago, who were both young Black women in a predominantly white area. Like, I think it's important for folks to also understand how important that advocacy piece is on the administrators and staff and teachers and adults who are seen as pillars of support and safety for youth, because it's the level of exhaustion that so many Black kids face just to sit in a classroom or just to go to school and have to deal with just the smallest microaggressions. I remember in high school, a lot of the microaggressions were coming from staff. You know what I mean? And so just really understanding that alone is something that is so exhausting and heavy for a young person to deal with, for anybody to deal with. And so really being able to be that, like you said, accomplice, that advocate, that ally, to really be able to sit there and take some of that burden off of those students who are already the only one in the room and who already know that, right? Black kids know that. When we're the only one in the room, no matter how young or old we are, no matter how much we've learned to assimilate, we know that. We know if we look different. We know if the food that we bring to lunch is different. We know if the way we talk or the way we look is different. We know all that. People know that from a very young age. Kids pick up on stuff. So doing whatever you can to make folks more comfortable to spend more time doing things like this and learning more about cultural competency, learning more about diversity, learning more about equitable ways of teaching, accessible ways of teaching, will be such a huge benefit to folks. And we already see, people like school boards like the DSBN, having already kickstarted doing that work. And so I think that's really important and awesome to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. When I think about, everything that we've talked about and threading a thread between all of those things, talking about reclaiming joy and the fact that that was an idea of the DSBN, when we were approached to even talk about this, to say, we want to talk about, more than just pain and suffering. We really want to talk about Black success and Black joy. And, there are hashtags out there like Black Boy Joy and Black Girl Magic to kind of emphasize excellence in the communities, I think is wonderful. But also, like you said, it doesn't have to just be these folks that have done these big things. It's you just exist. Like I'm just your Black member. And so like thinking about how Niagara has shaped our experiences and actualizing some of this work, one of the things that I think about is ensuring that it's driven from the seat of the folks that are experiencing the oppression. And in this case, you know, it for me, it would have been the students, asking students today what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what are the things that they want to see, because some of their things are different. Like the representation piece, for example, even in music and movies has definitely shifted since we were young, right?
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't that long ago, there has been a lot of shift in such a short period of time. And thinking about how, you know, young people today might have different needs, like making sure that we ground a lot of conversation in social media and the way that social media has become a vehicle for some of these conversations in a good way and in a great way, but also in a bad way too, right? And thinking about what that does for the psyche of our young people of all different races and what they're gaining or losing in those interactions.
Yeah.
And thinking about you know, having spaces where young folks can kind of say these are the things that we need and feel comfortable to say that, and somebody's going to support them and not laugh at them when they bring up a question, you know, or have a statement to say, or say, you know, get to a space where they feel comfortable enough to say, hey, something you did was harmful for me. That's huge. I think folks sometimes look at that in a negative way and say, oh, so and so said this to me. That means they're comfortable enough to even say it to you. One, or it was so egregious that it was something that, you know, folks are like, I can't sleep at night if I don't say it. But you know, thinking about all of those pieces. Lydia, I don't know if you have any, you know, closing notes that you want to highlight, but I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. Thank you so much, Kat.
Of course. And I know that we both are folks that are really keen on resources, so we'll also provide some resource lists for some things that speak to this topic for folks that are interested in taking the conversation a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Harper. I own Niagara Bound Tours, which is a Black history tour company here in Niagara. And I take people on tours, usually by motor coach, whatever. But now I've moved into what we call a car caravan tour. And I hope that after hearing a little bit about this, Black history in Niagara, you'll be interested and you'll go to my website, niagaraboundtours.com, and sign up a group of friends and or family for sure, and come on the tour. And I'm always available to answer questions through that website as well. I welcome it, actually. So I am 5+ generations Canadian. I identify as a Canadian, a Canadian of African descent, diluted. And the reason I say diluted is that I'm also part Mohawk as well as part German. And that's just on my mama's side. So many pieces and parts of me, but first and foremost, I am Canadian. Happy Black History Month to everyone. I start my presentation. There's so much in Niagara to show, and I'm just going to give you basically a quick introduction to Black history here in Canada and in Niagara in particular. And I started off by saying, this is my ancestral family, and they are Canadian. Sometimes that doesn't readily come to mind for people, but these are Canadians, and that's where I hope people will eventually get to, as well as the newer Black Canadians that don't always identify with our country. So anyway, the woman at the baby at the top was my mother. So this is taken probably 1928, 29. She'd be about 2 or 3 years old, and she's in the arms of my Uncle Jim. And her mother, my grandmother, is the pretty lady that doesn't have the smile on her face with the white dress on, standing beside the bride with the hairband. And so this is my family, and they are Canadians. And they've gone through so much in this country, but they persevered and they rose above. They had to work harder, be better to get even half of what others had in this country. They accepted it. They were incredibly faith-based. They endured by the color of their skin. They had endured that in their DNA was that travel from Africa on those horrible slave ships that you could smell before you could see them, and the separations of families at the slave markets, and conditioning to be enslaved people, and then being sold off and having to learn skills when people weren't speaking to them in their own language, and then generations later, being used, women being used as concubine to produce little babies, and just the horrible things that people can do to other. It's not eradicated immediately, is it? And neither was slavery. So anyway, I'm so proud that these are my ancestors and my community that I came from, because it wasn't easy for them living in Canada, but they lived here, they persevered, and they went through all kinds of things, as I said, to survive and make a life for themselves. Building their church was very important. This picture is very important. And very briefly, I'll tell you, when I started doing these tours back in 2004, so I'm entering my 18th year, I called this the Crossing Point Tour. And it's because when freedom seekers, when they left slavery and came to freedom, they were moving from crossing point. They were moving from one place to another, psychologically, physically, emotionally. And this is a site in Fort Erie that's called Freedom Park. And it's in Fort Erie. That's Fort Erie right there. Then you have the Niagara River. And then across from there, you had a place that was called Black Rock, which what is now known as Buffalo. So people would come across by ferry boat. This was a ferry landing, Forsyth Landing, because before the Peace Bridge was built in 1927, the only way to move goods and people was by ferry boat. So many people would travel that way. And on the other side of this, that brick wall that it looks kind of like a brick wall, is where the old Erie Canal used to be. So many would travel up the Erie Canal, and many of the captains on the boats were abolitionists that would assist and help these new refugees come into freedom. Now, keep in mind, and a lot of people don't realize, Canada had slavery too. As I mentioned earlier, slavery was a worldwide commodity. So you had slavery all over the world. And with Canada being part of the British Empire, we had slavery here also. But the thing that we can take solace in and pride in is that we started the abolition of slavery earlier than most around the world, certainly within the British colony. In 1793, a young girl by the name of Chloe Cooley was being sold off to the United States because John Graves Simcoe would have freed all the enslaved when he came to Canada as the Queen's representative. But of course, it was part of the economy of the community, so he didn't do anything about it. But when Chloe Cooley was being sold back into the United States, and her protests were heard all over the village of Queenston, and she had actually been enslaved in Fort Erie at one point in time also. Word got back to John Graves Simcoe, and he came out with the Anti-Slave Act of 1793. And we have Chloe Cooley to thank for that. We oftentimes will thank John Graves Simcoe, and we do, because he did agree to sign the bill. But it was to the horrible experience of that poor young girl, Chloe Cooley, that and she left a footprint that had lasting effects here in Canada, that started the abolition of slavery. It wasn't total abolition. It's what you call manumission, which was a slow process of abolition of slavery. So there were all kinds of rules and regulations involved with that, but some people were made free. And then we also had the United Empire Loyalists, those that fought with the British Crown against the United States. They were able to come into Canada and obtain land. Richard Pierpoint was one of those people who's recognized in St. Catharines at Richard Pierpoint Park now. A lot of people think the Underground Road was a series of tunnels. It was not. It was an operation, a secret operation of moving enslaved from slavery to freedom. And it was made up of whites, free blacks, First Nations, Catholics, Protestants, Jewish people. Anyone who felt slavery was a social injustice. And I realize this was a very short introduction,
But I hope that you gleaned some information. And please reach out to me at my website, niagaraboundtours.com, and with any questions that you have, and I'd be more than happy to answer them then. And I wish all of you going forward this month a happy Black History Month, and I hope this has facilitated you to want to learn more in the future. Take care.
Hello, my name is Coben. I am a grade 11 student at the DSBN, and I would like to welcome Norayu Kapitsavanu, the Executive Director of the TOES Niagara, to our Black History Month celebration. So we have a couple of questions for you. So our first question is, can you tell us about TOES Niagara and how it supports families in the Niagara region?
TOES Niagara is a not-for-profit organization that was founded in 2013, and our work focuses on providing programming, supports, and resources to improve the economic, educational, and mental well-being outcomes of women and their families who are marginalized because of race, gender, sexual orientation, and citizenship status, with specific focus on Black communities. And some of our programs cover self-employment, skills development, human trafficking, education and awareness, as well as mentorship. And we also provide a platform for advocacy for issues affecting the Black community in Niagara through the Coalition for Change.
That's amazing. So our second question is, what led you to start TOES Niagara?
I wanted to create a platform that addressed the barriers and obstacles that I faced as a newcomer to the region that I felt were not being addressed at that time that TOES Niagara was created in 2013.
So we have a third question. So I understand that DSBN has received a David S. House grant from the Niagara Community Foundation, so you could provide a mentorship program for Black youths ages 12 to 18 and their families in Niagara. And I was wondering if you could tell us about that and why it is so important.
Yeah, the mentorship program is all about providing role models. I think most people have role models, whether they're actors or somebody that they look up to. They inspire us to be, to want to be more, to achieve more. And so I thought, it would be great to have a mentorship program within the school boards where Black youth specifically, because when the research shows that Black youth or racialized youth have fewer role models or opportunities to have mentors. And so we thought if we created a Black youth mentorship program, we provide a space where the Black youth can connect with leaders in the community that look like them, people that can inspire them, that can help them to walk with them in their journeys to reach their desired, whether it's career goals or personal objectives. These are people that have share the same lived experience that can help to open up doors and open up networks for them. And one of the key things or key elements that we focus on in the mentorship program is the mental health well-being of Black students. Racism is real and it produces trauma, and we wanted to create a safe space where the Black students can talk about the traumas that they experience in any, whether it's at work, at home, in the public spaces from racism, and then find and acquire skills to help them with dealing or channeling the trauma and the anger in positive ways. And for that, we are grateful to Dr. Oyedeji from Queen's University, Kingston, who helps support our youth and their families to achieve mental health well-being.
That sounds amazing. And our last question and final question is, can you share with us what you do to celebrate Black History Month?
Black History Month for me is a continuation of what I do every day. I recognize, own, and walk in my magnificence, and I help other people recognize, own, and walk in their magnificence 365 days, recognizing that Black history is a social construct and that I am more than my given color of skin. So Black history is every day for me. And so I just celebrate it by walking and recognizing my magnificence.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us and sharing your story and time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Erica, and I'm here with Jada from Matter of Black Community Services. We're going to start with our introductions of each of our co-founders, and then followed by our story about how we got started, And finally, we're going to conclude with the main event that we organized, which is Emancipation Day STC. So I'm Erica Smith. I'm the granddaughter of St. Catharines civil rights activist Helen Mabel Nicholson Smith, and I'm also a descendant of freedom seekers John and Margaret Castle and Adam Nicholson. I'm a co-founder of Matter of Black, as well as a member of the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association, in addition to the District School Board of Niagara's Equity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism Community Advisory Committee. I'm an advocate for social justice, and I currently work at the DSBN as a secondary school teacher, teaching both math and French. All right, on to you, Jada.
Hi, my name is Jada Stainhouse, and I am also a co-founder of Matter of Black. Like Erica, I too have ancestral ties, to freedom seekers who courageously fought for their freedom and eventually settled here in the Niagara region. I am a lifelong St. Catharines resident and was a DSBN student throughout my primary and secondary education. I'm currently pursuing my bachelor's degree in medical sciences at Brock University, and I plan on pursuing my medical degree in the future. But whatever career that I fall into, I look forward to returning to Niagara to serve my community.
All right, Natasha Bell is a co-founder of the Matter of Black. She is a descendant of freedom seekers who settled in the Niagara region. She is also the founder of Black-Owned 905, which she created in June of 2020 to highlight and promote Black-owned businesses in the Niagara region. Since creating Black-Owned 905, Natasha has been awarded with the Meridian Community Spirit Award and the first ever Niagara Impact Award, among many others that she's even received this year. She's been a real great contribution to the Black community.
And this is Mutsa Sharamba, who unfortunately could not be with us today. She is a resident of St. Catharines who originates from Zimbabwe. She is also a co-founder of Matter of Black and an active member of the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association, the Niagara Migrant Workers Interest Group, and a co-director of Erica's Embrace Support Services. She works as an education coordinator for Positive Living Niagara, where she focuses on prevention, education, policy, health promotion, care, support, and research as a response to HIV/AIDS in Niagara's African, Caribbean, and Black communities.
All right, so this is a little bit about our story as to how we got started as Matter of Black. So when you feel a call to action, act on it. That's exactly what we did and how we started Matter of Black. The pictures in front of you come from the June 6th peaceful demonstration for Black Lives Matter that was held in Niagara Falls. In the picture on the right, believe it or not, I was at the very back of that crowd, and I was feeling powerless during that time at the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement. And actually, one of our guest speakers in our speaker series in 2019, Dr. Tamari Katosa, made a statement that was really impactful to me. He said that the Black Lives Matter movement was actually just a moment within the greater civil rights movement. And I thought that was very powerful. And it's a little taste of some of the speakers that we'll talk about and are organizing around our speaker series for Emancipation Day. So as I said, the Black Lives Matter movement had me feeling pretty powerless, and I just felt like I needed to do something to feel empowered. That day, I marched from the very back of that crowd up to the presenters, and I read a poem that was created by my grandmother, Helen Mabel Nicholson Smith. And the picture in the top left corner is actually Jada's sign as she was at the protest. And it states, in other years, yes, in days gone by, the Blacks and the whites, they fought side by side. They knew that united they would stand and divided they would fall. So they stood together to gain freedom for all. That is a powerful excerpt from my grandmother's poem. And it really resonated with that day. And that's actually the poem that I delivered that day to that big audience. And it was a very empowering moment. So yeah, it was basically all of that energy, all of that feeling that kind of made us feel like, what can we do? We need to do a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a very similar experience to Erica. You know, I attended the demonstrations that were held, this one, of course, in Niagara Falls, and I believe there was one a day earlier in Niagara on the Lake, and I just felt very compelled to be involved with something that was more long lasting, that had an opportunity to really make a difference in the community, that went outside of that one day. As powerful as that one day was, I felt the need to do something more. So a couple of weeks following the protest, that's when I met with Erica, Mutsa, and Natasha. as we all kind of collectively had that feeling, and we began to discuss, what we could do about it. And that's when Natasha brought up that she'd been in contact with Mayor Walter Stenzik, and he had the idea of revitalizing the Emancipation Day celebrations that historically took place in Lakeside Park for years and years and years, which we will talk about more on in this presentation. But yeah, that's how we got started.
So these are some pictures, thanks to the St. Catharines Museum, of what is affectionately known as the Big Picnic. It was the first weekend in August, and it was the advertisement for it was word of mouth. If you had been to the Big Picnic before, you knew that it was happening in that first week of August, and it brought Black Canadians and Black Americans from far and wide. And when I say Black Canadians and Black Americans, we say Black with a capital B because when we were freedom seekers, our ancestors who were freedom seekers, we were stolen from Africa. And along with being stolen, so was our ties to Africa. So our identity, our ethnicity, our culture is as Black Canadians, as far as my family goes. So I often explain that to people that is my ethnicity, like being Black with a capital B. That's the same as being African with that capital A. So they came from far and wide to celebrate Emancipation Day, or the Big Picnic, as it was affectionately known. And during the day, it was like a fair-like atmosphere. You can see in the top left photo, people playing on the beach, and in the bottom right photo, people playing in the water. And actually in the top right-hand corner, that is our Aunt Connie with our cousin Karen, who was on the Ferris wheel, which was, even back then, a big part of the event.
And I can talk a bit more about the carousel. There is a famous black horse on the carousel, and it's actually designated as a symbol of the troop of Black horses that were led by representatives of the Colored Corps. And this was a famous organization of freed slaves of African descent who volunteered to fight with the British in the War of 1812. So that horse is not into that history. And of course, those courageous individuals who fought in 1812. And it's a reminder of the courage and tenacity of ancestors of Black Canadian and African American communities, both in Niagara and throughout North America. So Port de Lucie's history of hosting Emancipation Day is so rich, and we are just grateful to be in this position and to have the opportunity to help revive these celebrations for the coming years.
So these are some pictures from the Big Picnic of how the picnic would carry on into the evening. And it was usually the adults who carried on the festivities with dancing, singing, and of course, the wonderful music. And in 2019, the first year that we revitalized the Emancipation Day celebration, one of my friends reached out to me and said, my grandmother knew about Emancipation Day. She used to actually sneak out of her house so that she could go down and participate in the events. She loved the dancing, she loved the music, and it was just something she wasn't allowed to go and do. So she made sure every year that she made it down to Lakeside Park to take part in the celebration, which I thought was just like a really touching moment that somebody's grandparent knew about it. And I mean, sometimes this gets lost because if it's just that oral tradition of passing on when it's going to happen, you don't always hear about it. You don't know that it's going on. And certainly community members who weren't Black didn't necessarily know. And it wasn't as if they weren't invited to it, because anybody who showed up at Lakeside Park was willing or was able to take part in everything that was going on. But it was either they weren't allowed by their parents to head down there, or they just didn't know what was going on. So the kickoff event for Emancipation Day STC is the flag raising at the St. Catharines City Hall. We contacted the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association, who had acquired a Pan-African flag to be the flag that we raised to kick off this weekend celebration. The Pan-African flag was created in 1920 to represent people of the African diaspora and to symbolize Black liberation in the United States. As flags symbolize the union of governance, people, and territory, this flag was created to give Black people in America and the world all over a symbol that unifies the diaspora. This tricolor flag consists of 3 equal horizontal bands colored red, black, and green. The red represents the blood that unites all people of the Black African ancestry and that was shed in liberation. The black represents the people whose existence as a nation, though not a nation state, is affirmed by the existence of the flag. The green is representative of the abundant and vibrant natural wealth of Africa, the motherland. So, in addition to partnering with the Performing Arts Center to bring incredible entertainment, last year we also partnered with Niagara TD Jazz Festival to present an incredible lineup of very talented Black artists. And it was beautiful to see it all come together. One of the best things about Matter of Black has been our ability to network and to reach out to people who are already doing some beautiful work and have already established connections with entertainment, with music, with artists. And that was a beautiful set that was put together.
So along with the entertainment and the fun stuff, it is important to us that we also offer educational opportunities to better our community. So this was a speaker series that was offered this past Emancipation Day celebration called Anti-Blackness and Community Health Panel Discussion, the Effects of Stigma Within the Black Community. MUTSA facilitated this discussion with panelists Lydia Collins, Katawi Henry, Erica Williams, and Dr. Alexandra Ojek. So I do want to recognize how fantastic the community has been in not only engaging and joining us in the celebration, but the many individuals that, like these panelists, who have selflessly offered their time and efforts to deliver these impactful events and offer their own insightful perspectives and experiences.
So Natasha Bell from Matter of Black, one of our co-founders, she's also the founder of Black Owned 905. And it's incredible the way that she put this together. And it's made very apparent that there was a need for someone to help people identify the Black businesses that are out there, to promote them, to amplify them in the community, and to just get their names out there. She has shared multiple inbox messages where people are just praising the platform that she's provided. So if you are somebody who is interested, maybe you are a Black artist, a Black, entrepreneur, we would like for you to reach out to us at Matter of Black, and as well as Natasha at Black Owned 905. Get your business out there.
Famous quote from Harriet Tubman. I'm sure most of you watching are familiar with her and everything she's done and the ties that she has to the region. But she says, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and change the world. And that's where we'll leave you with today. Thank you very much for having us today.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure. We hope to see you at Emancipation Day, STC 2022, in person. In person.
Hello, my name is Tonia Loto, and I'm a grade 12 DSBN student, and the poem I'm about to recite is actually a mix of about 3 or 4 different poems that I thought really influenced me a lot, so I decided to perform them. I hope you enjoy. I understand the debate. Black on Black violence in the community, taking lives like a video game. Not treating each other humanly. Institutionalized self-hatred bred since the days of slaves, one of the main reasons for this modern day craze. They shut us up and kept us from remembering that if they had fixed the streets, children wouldn't have rocks to throw in the first place. But do not change the subject. Let's stay focused on the topic. What the police is doing is worse. Let's not be so myopic. A finger is a gun. A wallet is a gun. Black is a weapon. Jamal kills Malik. He gets 25 to life. Officer Smith pulls the trigger. He eats dinner with his wife.
Good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing Erica Williams from Erica's Embrace Support Services. Erica's Embrace is a local non-for-profit that offers advocacy and donates hair and beauty care products for Black women staying in shelters in Ontario. As a part of tonight's event in celebrating Black joy and excellence, we wanted to highlight examples of the amazing work that is happening in Niagara region. Thank you again, Erica, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Excited to take part.
So why don't we start with your story? Like, I know that you're studying to be a social worker, you're a passionate social justice activist. So what led you to this path?
I would have to say what kind of made me start everything was my experience in the shelters. So I've done a lot of work in the past, working in shelters that support women and children who are fleeing from domestic violence. And inside these shelters, the majority of them, if not all of them, will have donations that come through for the women that are staying there. And these donations can be clothing, but it also consists of beauty care products, so shampoos, conditioners, makeup, and just different various hair and beauty care items. But the issue was that none of these products were ever products that could be used by women who had darker skin tones or women who had really curly hair. And it was a problem because Black women were coming into the shelters, and a lot of times their needs weren't being met in that way. And I had a very frustrated client, actually, one evening who kind of pointed that out to me. And she was frustrated at the fact that she couldn't get what she needed for her hair or her daughter's hair. And I kind of thought to myself, she's right. Why doesn't she have that option inside here? There are so many other different types of shampoos and nothing for Black women. So that was kind of what lit the fire under me, I guess you would say. And it started really small. So it started back in 2018. And it was just me kind of collecting things on my own, close family members and friends of mine that knew what I was doing, but also donate. And that's pretty much how it started.
Well, we do have, we have families, we have community members, we have students that are listening in tonight. So if there are any questions or people would like to support with donations or maybe even reach out, you talked about you wanted to, collaborate and, possibly create a hub because, the demand is more than, you can support at this time. So how can people reach out to you?
So people can reach out by email, so info@ericasembrace.com, or you can even send us a message on our social media, Facebook or Instagram at Erica's Embrace. And you can even call too, so our number is on our website. So there's so many different ways that you can reach out to us, and we are pretty quick to get back to you as well. So.
That's great. No, and I was on your website and I could see how easy it was to donate, products and stuff. And last question, is it easier for donations for it to be monetary, or do you get donations where people actually come and drop things off?
So we've had both. We've had some people who will contact us, and I mean, throughout the pandemic, we were even doing porch pickups of Black hair care products, which is amazing. We have some really good community members who, wanted to get involved and wanted to do something to support the Black community, and it was kind of like a learning experience. So another thing on our website is you can go on and find a list of needed items that we would use for hair care and skin care. So there are some people who loved going out to do that. And then there are some people that were, they kind of didn't know what to buy, and it was just easier for them to do monetary. So either or works fine. We accept both, and we're grateful for anything that we get.
First thing I want to do right now is I want to thank everybody for showing up and listening. I want to give a shout out to Mrs. Wild and Mrs. Akia for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about what some of a life is like as someone of color in the DSBN. Overall, it is really good, but generally speaking, of course, with all the good, you have shadow, and there is drawbacks. And what I want to get into that, I'm going to explain in a bit. What I've come to you today with is a poem I've written. I figured I'll give you some media That would help guide a little thing. This one's called Same But Different. We are the same but different. We're seen but never heard. We try to speak, but ignorance leaves them deaf to every word. Even if it's hard, and our teeth grit with every part. Like our brothers in the South has got it worse, so we're not up to par. Like our skin, we're overshadowed, and we're not trending. And without the likes or clicks or views, our help is slowly ending. Even though we're equal, we still see your gaze. We feel it's clutched just like your purse when we walk past the way. And though it isn't blatant, them jabs still hurt. And it piles up until we finally break and burst. I want to be seen, just like you see your brother, not as a hashtag, a cartoon, or another number. Cut us both and red will flow steady with beats to match. Just keep that red deep in our veins, and what spills, we'll patch. What I'm trying to say with all this is that in the DSBN, nothing is blatant, but everyone still has their own bias. Like when I would go to the dollar store, I'd be the one getting followed around because they think that I'm the one that's going to steal. Meanwhile, usually it's the kids of other tones that would do such things. And with something as simple as just understanding and insensitivity. And when I speak of ignorance, it's not that they mean to be disrespectful. They don't mean to cause harm in any way. But that's just what happens. And the way we can combat this is we can have seminars just like this. We can explain things to you. We can talk. Communication is going to be key with all this. That's how we're social creatures. That's how we learn and grow. And I think as long as we keep doing that, we're just going to get better and better and better. We'll keep learning. We'll keep getting things right. Yeah, anyways, that's all I have to say to you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Cheers. Our next speaker is no stranger to the world of spoken word poetry. Dwayne Morgan began his career in the spoken word in 1993. Affectionately called the godfather of Canadian spoken word by his peers, Morgan is the author of 13 published and 9 audio collections of his work. Morgan is a 2021 finalist for the Toronto Arts Foundation for the Margot Linthart and Rita Davies Award. He was also a 2016 finalist for the Premier's Award for Excellence in the Arts and a 2013 inductee into the Scarborough Walk of Fame. To date, Morgan has shared his work in 18 countries internationally. Welcome, Mr. Dwayne Morgan.
Good evening. I hope that this finds all of you doing extremely well. My name is Dwayne Morgan. Big shout out to the District of Niagara School Board for inviting me to share a little bit with you as part of your celebration this evening. And, I have lived an exceptional life and career beyond what I ever thought or imagined for myself. I'm a artist, I'm a writer. I grew up hating to read, but now I'm the author of 14 books. I'm a shy introvert, but I've toured 18 countries around the world. It's very important to me to always speak to the community and breathe life into our young people, because it is very easy to get caught up in all of the negativity, to not see your potential, to not see the opportunities, to start believing the things that other people think about us, to start having your life mimic the stereotypes that people hold towards us. But I always encourage young people to be brilliant, to be excellent. I say the pursuit of excellence trumps any ism that is put in front of you, racism, sexism, whatever it is. It is that pursuit of excellence. But I'm going to talk about how we get to that pursuit of excellence, how we embrace that excellence. So a lot of times I speak to young students, usually in high school. And a lot of times the Black students will say, you know what? They're not really feeling the whole Black History Month thing because everybody wants to talk about slavery and all this stuff, and it just doesn't make them feel good. And I get it. And that makes sense. And that is a very fair critique. Because when I ask people outside of the continent of Africa, what country has the most Black people in it? The majority of people say the United States, and that is incorrect. That's number 2. But the number 1 country is Brazil. And the people of Brazil speak Portuguese. And the people of Brazil speak Portuguese because it was Portugal who started the Atlantic slave trade. Other European countries got involved, and the wealth and the modernization that we see in Europe has come on the backs of Black people, has come as a result of human trafficking and unmentionable experiences. But one thing that is very clear is that none of those things are our history. That is European history. That is other people's history that is so dark and ugly that they try to project it onto us. But we didn't do that. When we take things a step further, we didn't tell people that they couldn't come to school with us. We didn't tell people that they had to sit at the back of the bus. We didn't tell people that they couldn't drink from the same fountain. We couldn't tell people that they couldn't eat in the same restaurant. We couldn't tell people that they couldn't enter through the front door. That is not our history. That is somebody else's history. That they try to make it seem as though that is our history. But it is important to remember that your history is what you have done, not what has been done to you. So if you want to talk about slavery in the context of Black History Month, then speak about how did we survive it? What is the brilliance that we tapped into in that period of time? Speak about the brilliance of being enslaved by other people and figuring out how to invent the refrigerator, the freezer, how to cornrow maps into our hair so that we could escape. When we think about it, Black people have always been leading the way in the fight towards equality, in the fight against injustice. Coming out of slavery, coming out of slavery, we had the civil rights movement that was led by so many different fractions of the Black community. When you think about Pride, also started from the Black community. When you think of the Black Lives Matter movement, started in the Black community. When you think of the Me Too movement, started in the Black community. You see, our history is rooted in the liberation of ourselves, but everyone else. That is part of our history. So never buy into what people are trying to sell, where they try to make their history your history. Your history is always what you have done, what you have contributed to the world. And we have given this world so much. So people still ask me, well, why this month? Why do we even have this month? And here's how I break it down. In the Berlin Olympics, Adolf Hitler was convinced of the inferiority of a number of races and groups of people, Black people being one of them. And we all know how important the 100-meter race is, because whoever wins the 100 meters is touted as the fastest human being on the planet, and they're thrown into stardom. Hitler didn't believe that Black people could be successful because of his inherent belief in our inferiority. So he attended the 100 meters. This was the same year a sprinter from the United States by the name of Jesse Owens ended up winning the gold medal, proving Hitler wrong in his face. But that is not the reason why we have this month. Imagine this. Imagine if we didn't have the technology that we have today, and we had to listen to that race on the radio, and we hear the gun go off, and the person on the radio says, in lane 1, the runner from England is off to a great start. In lane 2, the runner from Scotland is catching up. In lane 3, the runner from Turkey is doing well. In lane 5, the runner from Germany. And you're like, where is Jesse Owens? How y'all skip over lane 3, lane 4? Where is he? How you not mentioning this guy? Well, that's the reason why this month exists. Because in the race of life, if Jesse Owens was in lane 3, and if Jesse Owens represented Black people, for some reason, the world told the history of every other lane and left out that one. So our responsibility this month is to fill in the blanks, is to look at all of the great things that we have done and contributed to this world, so that our young people understand that life and history is a relay race. And everything that we learn about that has happened before us was to give us the baton. And now we are here, staring at this baton, looking at all of the things in this world that we still need to do, we still need to change, we still need to affect. And our responsibility is to figure out, how do I continue what has come before me, so that when I pass this baton on, the people that receive it from me will enter into a world that was more just than the one that I was born into. And this is not something that any one person can do. This is not something just for Black people to do. This is something that all of us have to look around us and see injustice, inequity, see people just striving to be themselves, to be accepted. And we have to figure out, what is it that I can do with the gifts and the talents that I have to move things forward. It was 4 a.m. when she woke me. And I can still remember the cold sweat on the back of my neck like it was yesterday. 14 years have now passed. And I can still remember the pregnancy test in my hand and how it felt like my heart and my world had stopped simultaneously, and nobody knows this. But at every doctor's visit, as he would perform routine ultrasounds, I would look from the ground to the screen, hoping, praying to God that none of the squiggly lines that I was seeing would confirm this little being as a boy. And I don't feel good about it. But I've lived a long time in skin despised simply for its hue, so every November I go poppyless. Not out of disrespect, I'm just not a fan of Remembrance Day, remembering that there has never been a plane sent to save us. We are the displaced. Our bodies and religion stolen. We were given a new prophet as they used us to make profits. Ask Nike what a Black man is worth. For hundreds of years, we've been killed as a form of amusement, gunned down with no fear of repercussions, so don't blame me for not wanting to be burdened by the birth of a Black boy, born into a world built on his back, forcing me to teach him how to write and his rights, knowing that even my greatest efforts can't keep him alive when his skin is a threat. So yes, I stood there, staring blankly at a screen, hoping, praying to God that none of the squiggly lines that I was seeing would confirm this little being as a boy, maybe. Having a girl would increase my chances of not having a child who'd grow up to be a hashtag trending, because the killing of Black men has been a trend since forever. So we write Black Lives Matter, not to try to inform others, but to try to convince ourselves in a world that is constantly showing us otherwise, and my heart can't help but break for those parents who have had their children snatched from their lives. It was an April afternoon when I found myself pacing around a delivery room, wondering if my prayers would be answered at 3:20. The most precious little girl was presented to me, and I cried uncontrollably for hours, knowing that I had just been blessed. Not because having a girl would make her worth more, but because we live in a world where Black boys will always be worth less. Thank y'all. So as I said before, we need to figure out, how do we get to that level of excellence where we can commit ourselves to being excellent in everything that we do. So the first thing is we have to understand that the pursuit of excellence is tied to the level of love that we have for ourselves. It is tied to what we see as our purpose, our gifts, what we can give to the world. Unfortunately, for many of us, we don't fully believe in ourselves. We don't fully love ourselves. You see, we live in a society today where for most of us, when we see our own reflection, we point out everything that is wrong with us. Oh my gosh, I'm getting acne. Oh my gosh, I'm gaining weight. But how often do you look at yourself and point out everything that is right with you? So here's what we're going to do. Probably many of you listening to me right now, school is a distant memory. That was a long time ago. But if you are listening to me right now, I am going to give you a homework activity. And this homework activity, if you commit yourself to it, will change everything that happens in your life from today moving forward. Because you see, sometimes we are our own worst enemies. Sometimes we have conversations with ourselves that are very negative and nobody knows about. And we don't affirm ourselves. We're very negative with ourselves. So this is your homework. Your homework is going to take place the next time you take a shower. Maybe you just had the greatest concert known to human beings. And when you come out of the shower, you're going to stand in front of the mirror. And when you stand in front of the mirror, I want you to make eye contact with your reflection. And when you look at yourself, for your homework, I want you to say to yourself, you have got to be the hottest thing walking. Like, look at you. I want you to fall deeply, passionately, magically in love with yourself, because that is the greatest love affair you are ever going to have in this lifetime. And the reason why I ask people to do this homework when they come out of the shower is because some people can only like and accept themselves when they have their favorite outfit on, when their face is done a certain way, their hair is done up, they got their hijab on that they love. But you have to be able to love and accept yourself with nothing but the skin that you are in. You have to be able to say, hey, this is me, take it or leave it, but I love it. And here's the thing. Most of the choices that we will make for ourselves in life can be tied back to how in love were you with yourself at the time when you made that choice. So the pursuit of excellence is actually a display of love. Love for yourself. Because we have always been excellent. We have always made contributions. And now it is upon us to figure out, what are we going to do with the lives that we are living today to move things forward, to usher in a new reality for those who are going to come after us. On your mark, get set, and so it begins. On the dark continent of enlightenment, the place from where all history comes, a people who were so ahead of their time they were sending text messages when they only had drums. Out of the starting blocks, we were off to an early lead as world travelers and explorers, sharing our philosophies, creating universities and structures that would make the world stop and wonder before passing the baton on to the relay's next runner in the Caribbean Sea, who lost a bit of ground through the Middle Passage and slavery, but nobody said that the race would be easy. So for over 400 years, they continued to run, limping through the pain, knowing that cramps will come and it's going to hurt sometimes. But you've got to focus and keep going through the plantations, the lynchings, and the hate, even when the spectators in the stands call you other than your name, because it is not what we are called, but what we answer to that is important. Victory is an uphill climb, and we've got to continue to rise like Lazarus, knowing that even the slightest of steps can mean so much. Sister Rosa Parks sat down to stand up, so I can't give up as I try to make sense of this baton that's been placed in my hand while I struggle just to be accepted as a man in this world that seems more concerned with whether or not I'm endowed down south, and I'm all about being endowed in the places where it counts, in my family and my community, because knowledge of self is like a garden. If it is not cultivated, you cannot reap a harvest. Victory will come to those who choose to run the hardest, and it really doesn't matter if you know the secret, because not everyone will believe enough in themselves to do something with the information. No one was made to be a spectator in life. We are all the active participants in the race to fulfill our destiny. So when the baton comes, take it and run, because failure isn't a crime, but aiming too low is. Because if you reach for the top of a tree, you might never get off the ground. But if you shoot for the stars, you might at the very least get to the top of that tree. And I might not get to the finish line with you, but I will continue to strive to carve out my own space before passing this baton on to a new generation of runner, confident in victory, because success, it runs in my race. Thank you all very much. Peace.
Thank you for joining us this evening, and to all of our presenters for sharing their work, knowledge, and talent. We look forward to you joining us for our next Building Cultural Knowledge series. Stay tuned for more information in the coming months. Good night, everyone, and thank you for tuning in.